Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargava, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. Last week on Thursday, the National Investigation Agency and the Enforcement Directorate conducted massive searches and raids on the properties linked to the Popular Front of India, or PFI, which is a radical Islamist organization. Subsequently, police forces in multiple states conducted a second round of raids against the organization. During these raids, more than 100 people were arrested and several others were detained. And then on Wednesday, the center banned the PFI and its affiliates for 5 years. The Ministry of Home Affairs, invoking the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, or UAPA, said that the PFI and its affiliates are linked to terror groups like the ISIS and that they propagate anti-national sentiments, seek to radicalize a particular section of society with the intention to create disaffection, and constitute a major threat to internal security of the country. Now, within hours of the ban, the PFI then announced that it had disbanded. In this episode, we talk about the origins of the PFI, the cases it has been associated with, and what the ban means for it. And for this, we first speak to Indian Express's Deeptiman Tiwary, who reports on government agencies for the paper. Deeptiman, what would you tell someone who doesn't know anything about the PFI?
Well, Popular Front of India is basically an Islamic socio-political organization, and it has been active since 2006-07. Its formation was made in 2006, basically when three organizations in South India, the National Democratic Front in Kerala, the Karnataka Forum for Dignity, and Manithaniti Pasarai in Tamil Nadu. They came together, merged, and formed PFI, and it began functioning since 2007. Since then, PFI has spread its activity to near about 17 states, where it has a robust organization and has activity. It has many other affiliate organizations, such as Campus Front of India, which engages with students in universities. It has organizations dealing with school children, dealing with women, dealing with ulemas, and various other sections of largely the Muslim society. And it largely engages with the Muslim society. A few years back, it also floated its own political party, which is called the SDPI.
SDPI, of course, is the Social Democratic Party of India and is basically the political wing of the PFI.
Yes, in fact, PFI is organized very much on the lines of the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. And it has military wings like the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh has. Similar organizational structure has, obviously the goals are different, but organizational structure and manner of functioning organizationally is the same. Like they have, like RSS has an ABVP, which engages with students in universities, the student political front of RSS. Similarly, they have Campus Front of India, which is there in universities in several states in South India. And like the RSS has women's wing and dealing with children, sadhus, mahatmas, and all kinds of cultural things. Similarly, PFI does the same in the Muslim society. Obviously, this is not to say that RSS and PFI are the same. I'm just talking about the organizational structure of the two organizations.
Okay, so PFI was formed around 2006-2007, and it actually formed after the Students' Islamic Movement of India, or SIMI, was banned under the Atal Bihari Vajpayee government. Could you talk a bit about SIMI and why it was banned?
Well, SIMI at that time, many of its members had been found by various police organizations, including central agencies and state police, to have been engaged in terror activities. One of the prominent names of that time is Safdar Nagori, who was said to have floated a militant faction of the SIMI, which was actually started as, again, a socio-political organization, which was basically engaging with students in universities. But Safdar Nagori, in the aftermath of Babri demolitions, he got radicalized and he floated a militant faction which believed in targeted killings of basically Hindutva leaders. In fact, one of Safdar Nagori's famous targets was Advani. So it was in the aftermath of these developments and many of SIMI members being caught in terror activities. Some were found making pipe bombs. Some were found engaged in organizing terror camps and terror training camps. Some were charge sheeted for radicalizing youth. or those kind of activities. In the aftermath of those things, the entire Simi was banned, even the moderate faction was banned. So, although it didn't amount to much because the entire movement just went on underground. And what we saw later was emergence of PFI, where many of its leaders are actually former members of Student Islamic Movement of India, and the emergence of Indian Mujahideen, which terrorized India from mid-2000s till 2012, until Yasin Bhatkal was caught in Nepal. And by 2013-14, most of its operatives are neutralized. So that's how Simi actually metamorphosed into other groups.
Also, PFI has been most prominent in Kerala, where it has been repeatedly accused of murder, rioting, and intimidation. Could you talk about some of the biggest cases it has been associated with?
One of the most prominent cases that PFI activists were linked to was what is known as the palm chopping case. In 2010, some PFI activists allegedly chopped off the palms of a professor who had allegedly framed some question which they perceived to be blasphemous to the Prophet. And that was the time when PFI suddenly emerged as this hardline, radical Islamic organization which would not tolerate any insult to Islam, or which would not give that kind of liberal space which is expected out of a socio-political organization. Since then, there has been this massive tussle, especially in Kerala, between Hindutva organizations such as the RSS, VHP and Bajrang Dal and the PFI, who have clashed amongst each other, and police allege that several of RSS members or VHP and Bajrang Dal members have been over the years hacked to death brutally by suspected PFI activists. And there are multiple cases which have been filed over the years, both by Kerala police and central agencies such as the National Investigation Agency. Now even Enforcement Directorate is investigating the organization. So a lot of what you can say is socio-political murders, targeted killings have been linked to PFI at least since 2010. Of late, this clash has even increased because the BJP and RSS have been trying to increase their footprint in Kerala, and that's where the clashes have escalated, and that's how killings have also increased.
Right, and besides this, it is also said that PFI has links with terrorist organizations. So what do we know about those links?
Well, with this advent of Islamic State, as we saw in 2012, 13, 14 period, lots of young people from Kerala went to Syria and Iraq to fight alongside the Islamic State. Some of these were found to be former members of PFI. During the crackdowns on Islamic State supporters or members, if you can say, or those who owe allegiance to the organization, it was found that some of those young people were members of PFI or had some connection with the PFI. There have also been allegations of some members having connection or having had interaction with some Al-Qaeda forum or some Al-Qaeda associate. So there have been some links with international terror organizations of some members of PFI. Whether they were former, they had left the organization, or they continued to be active members is not something which is very well known. Two was, over the years, during the crackdown by central agencies and state police, some recoveries which have been made from the PFI have indicated that they have some radical agenda. Like, for example, one document recovered was some Mission 2054 or 34, which said that by that time, India will be turned into an Islamic caliphate. Similarly, from one PFI member, an alleged recovery of how to make IEDs from easily available material was cited by the police. And several such incidents. Some of the recoveries do not actually say anything because they are basically physical education guidebooks which anybody could have. But yeah, there are some very serious recoveries which have been made, which include arms, ammunitions, sharp-edged weapons. And PFI has also been found to be involved in quite a few violent agitations where they have damaged public property and clashed with the police or with some other group, political group. So those are largely the charges and the basis on which government has decided to declare it as an unlawful association.
And Deeptiman, right now we are seeing central agencies, both ED and NIA, go after PFI. But when did the organization properly come under the radar of these agencies?
Actually, PFI has been under investigation since the 2010 palm chopping case. And that case was transferred to NIA, in which NIA charge sheeted some 24 people. 14 of these have been convicted. 11 are standing trial. The key accused has left the country and is absconding. And since then, there has been this focus on PFI and its activity. In fact, even the Kerala government and Kerala police has cracked down on PFI, and they have called it a hardline radical organization in their submissions to the Kerala High Court. And this crackdown on PFI has got more pronounced and more focused after the anti-CAA protests in Delhi, which later resulted in the unfortunate riots which killed many people. So at that time also, the police in Delhi, the police in UP and in some other states, they claimed that PFI had a major role in organizing violent protests against the Citizenship Amendment Act. And that was also the time when the Enforcement Directorate entered into the picture. And ED, in fact, prepared a report and sent it to the Ministry of Home Affairs, where it claimed that anti-CAA protests were particularly funded by PFI, and all of this money had flown in from the Gulf through Hawala channels or through shell companies. And ED also, in its charge sheet against journalist Siddiq Kappan, who is said to be associated with the PFI, also said that PFI was funding both anti-CAA protests and Delhi riots. So these were charges that were brought by Enforcement Directorate, and NIA too has opened some 19 cases against PFI members, and a large number of these are basically associated with either violent protests in Karnataka and Kerala or killing of RSS and Hindutva activists.
Right. So then what do we know about how many people from the PFI have been arrested for these matters?
So more than 100 people have already been arrested by the National Investigation Agency. In fact, the last week, some 106 people associated with the PFI, including some of its top leaders, were arrested by the two agencies. Now we have multiple cases, both with central agencies and with the state police. In fact, over the years, more than 1,300 cases associated with members of PFI have been registered across the country by various state police and central agencies. Assam too has recently claimed in many cases that whatever trouble that was caused in the state was because of the PFI. It claimed that PFI members were associated with Al-Qaeda. In his statements, Mr. Hemant Biswa Sarma has also called it a terror organization, asked for a ban, but interestingly, Assam never sent a proposal for a ban on PFI. It were 3 other states which did. UP was the first state to propose a ban on PFI. So that's basically been largely the activity of PFI and agency crackdown on the organization.
And Deeptiman, earlier we were talking about the RSS, the ideological parent of the BJP. Now, RSS has been demanding a ban on PFI for some time, right?
Yes, in fact, RSS has been sort of worried about PFI since its very formation, because it has the same organizational structure that RSS has. And we all know that an organizational structure and that kind of ideological zeal can sustain an organization for a very long time. And so RSS has always viewed it as not only antithetical to its own ideological projects, but also antithetical to social harmony. So RSS, in fact, after the palm chopping incident, while RSS has been articulating either directly or through its associate organizations such as Bajrang Dal and VHP, or its affiliated magazines such as The Organizer and Panchjanya, that PFI is a radical terror organization and that it should be banned. In fact, in Akhil Bharatiya Karyakari Mandal of Baithak of 2013, RSS even passed a resolution against PFI where it named PFI. RSS generally has avoided naming the PFI and only talking about it in an oblique manner, saying that certain Islamic organizations are fomenting trouble in the country or trying to create space in the government or whatever. But VHP and Bajrang Dal have had many protests against PFI, have openly demanded that this organization needs to be banned because it is a terror organization. and have consistently articulated how RSS and other Hindutva group members are targeted by PFI members in Kerala and later of late in Karnataka.
Okay, and now that the center has banned the PFI, what action can authorities take against its members now?
Once any organization is declared an unlawful association, all its members are liable to be arrested if they continue to be associated with the organization. That is why you see that PFI, immediately after the ban was announced, it issued a statement that it was disbanding the organization and asked all its members to cease all activity associated with the PFI. So anyone who continues to have any association with the organization after the ban is declared is liable to be arrested because it transforms into a criminal activity, just the association with the organization. Then there are provisions in the UAPA which will allow for freezing of its bank accounts, search and seizure of its finances, and prevention and prohibition of use of those finances in any further activity of the organization. So basically you can't use your money anymore. Whatever is there, it cannot be used. 3 is, following an inquiry, government agencies, be it state police or central agencies, will have also the power to confiscate its assets if those assets are found to be associated with criminal activity. In fact, district magistrates have powers to make a list of articles which are there in any building or house which is associated with the organization, and then investigate whether those are associated with the activity of the organization and then take further action. So basically all your assets, all your finances will be prohibited from any use. Even if it is not seized, you cannot use it. It is as good as a seizure. And your members will, if they continue to be associated, will be treated as criminals.
And at this point, can the PFI do anything to appeal this ban?
Yes, there is provision in the UAPA. In fact, the provision is that the government notification cannot come into effect until it is confirmed by the UAPA tribunal, where the notification has to be sent within 30 days and the tribunal has to decide within 6 months. However, in exceptional circumstances, the government notification can come into effect immediately, and the UAPA tribunal can later give its assent or revoke the ban, again in the same 6-month period. However, it has been said that the UAPA tribunal somewhat functions in a very opaque manner, and there have hardly been any orders of the government which have not been confirmed. Only briefly, the SIMI ban was lifted in 2008, and in the same year it was again reinstated. So there are very, very rare and few instances where a government order has not been confirmed by tribunals. But they have the option of going to a higher court and appeal against the ban. That option is always open. They can go to the Supreme Court and challenge the ban.
Okay, and Deeptiman, the center is obviously seeing this as a security concern, saying that the PFI has links with terrorist organizations. But what challenges will the government face in clamping down on this organization, and what concerns do you think this ban raises?
See, it's debatable how much a ban is effective, because SIMI was banned, but it didn't mean that terror activity in this country stopped actually. In fact, all the radical members of SIMI went underground, and what we saw is emergence of PFI and we saw emergence of Indian Mujahideen. So ultimately, the simple job is you have to neutralize the radical elements of an organization. Whether banning an entire organization is fruitful is debatable. I mean, RSS was also banned in this country. Did it finish the RSS? It didn't. RSS is flourishing. It has never flourished as much as it is today. So I don't know how much banning helps, but of course, the government must have thought it necessary with a sense of urgency. It has some information that we don't have, and so it has found it necessary to do so. Only time can tell as to how effective this will be, whether all radical activity in southern India or elsewhere, as the government is claiming, will stop after this, is yet to be seen.
Now, so far we have talked about what this ban could mean for the PFI and how the organization was formed. But at this point, it is also important to consider the political context in which it was formed, because that can tell us a lot about the organization and how it expanded. And for this, we speak to Amrith. who writes on politics and political history for the paper. And he says that to understand the origins of outfits like the PFI, we have to go back to the 1970s, when the Iranian Revolution took place, which is also called the Islamic Revolution. That is when the Pahlavi dynasty was overthrown after ruling for more than 50 years. People from a wide range of political spectrum had participated in the revolution, but in the end the royal dynasty was replaced by an Islamic state under the Ayatollah Khomeini.
So that gave impetus to a particular kind of political Islam, the strand which emerged in post-Iranian Revolution. So in 1980s, when you look at it, the rise of militant political Islam also coincides with the decline of the Soviet bloc. Until then, you had two blocs basically. You had the Western liberal capitalist order, which also claimed to be representing modernist virtues like electoral democracy, etc. And on the other side, the opposition was largely led by communism. You had the Soviet bloc. So that's the two blocks in which, and that's the two political alternatives which had existed till then. In 1980s, we see a different thing.
He says with Iran becoming an Islamic state, a new alternative emerged. One that was completely different from the liberal West and the communism of the East.
We should also remember that this Western liberal democratic order also was supporting a lot of autocratic regimes in West Asia, right? So to that, the challenge basically came, earlier used to be represented by, if it was by political left, now it became Islamic organizations. So that is a larger context in which political Islam becomes a ideological opposition to or opponent to Western liberal democracy.
And the churn that was happening in West Asia affected things in India as well because of the historical ties between the two regions. But Amrith says that in India, the main rupture happened in 1992 with the demolition of the Babri Masjid and the rise of Hindutva. That is when a lot of people began to perceive that the Muslim community was under threat in the country.
So that's when, 2-3 things happen. If you look at it historically, from 47 to the independence onwards, there is a period of nation building, and Congress was basically the voice of Indian Muslims, largely. Post Babri, that consensus breaks. Now, people are voting for different outfits in different regions. Samajwadi Party emerges in UP. Historically, the Dravidian parties had found support among Muslim communities in Tamil Nadu. So in different parts of India, there is a different kind of agency which people are looking towards. But politics that unravels after the demolition of Babri Masjid and the rise of Hindutva, that leads to a kind of churn which also is used by outfits like PFI, essentially to gain legitimacy.
He says that these outfits gained popularity by claiming that they would represent the rights of marginalized Muslims.
They speak the language of rights. The question is, how do you assert yourself? How do you enforce the politics of rights when you don't have the numbers to influence electoral politics? Ultimately, the numbers matters a lot in electoral politics, right? If you look at the last few years, you also realize that there has been the reports about increasing incarceration of young Muslim women. And the second thing is, invisibilization of Muslims in politics. You also have this, the fear that political institutions, state institutions, public institutions are actually becoming more and more majoritarian. These are real or imagined is a different thing, but there is this very strong fear. And outfits like PFI, PFI is not a political outfit. The political arm is SDPI. So they essentially tap into this well of resentment.
And he says that after the series of terror attacks that happened in 2000s, when the government clamped down on the Muslim youth, that also fed into this cycle.
So when the crackdown happens, there are also a lot of people who are arrested on suspicion. There are cases against them. People are jailed for extended period of time, 10 years, 15 years. They might come out after without conviction or anything. And this creates its own, it adds to the resentment, right? At one level, you feel that you're being marginalized in the political space. Then you fear that you're being denied your rights. You're being falsely implicated because the public consensus have become majoritarian. These are the kind of fears which essentially allow or provide a political space for organizations like PFI or SDPI, which essentially focuses a lot on their religious identity in mobilizing people, but use a language of constitutionalism when they speak about politics. So this is the kind of context in which we see Popular Front of India operating.
Now the current ban views PFI as a security threat. But Amrith says that because the organization has been politically connected with the people, concerns around this issue will also have to be addressed by the current mainstream political parties.
I mean, how do sectarian political groups emerge? It's basically because, there are certain challenges or certain kind of aspirations or certain kind of resentments which are not being met by political parties. That's when you have this kind of organizations emerging and appealing to sections of the community or sections of the population which find that they are not being treated fairly. So that challenge has to be taken up by mainstream political parties. You have to speak out against majoritarian ideas, agendas. You have to speak up for constitutional rights. You have to speak up for people who are in jail for extended period without bail. There is a whole lot of agenda which they have neglected for fear of electoral backlash. That has to be rethought. So your fear about electoral politics, deciding all your policy pronouncements, that has to change. So it is the challenge for mainstream political parties, which at least in theory claims to be inclusive. It's for them to take up these challenges and, ensure that there is no space left for very sectarian groups, very radical groups to appeal to people.
You were listening to Three Things by The Indian Express. Today's show was written and produced by me, Shashank Bhargava, and was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.